Hey guys, Jeff back again, and we are on our review of the 12 steps, and we're going to be reviewing step 3 tonight. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And as usual, I read the title, and then I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to read step 3. And number 1, I'm going to share with you what jumped out at me tonight, and I'm going to share kind of what it meant to me way back when I first started getting sober. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about the God thing. And the most critical part of this step is God as we understand Him, right? That's an important part, especially for people who may have a tough time talking about God or spirituality. So that's it. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So I'm going to read this now, and I'll be right back. So I'm back, and as usual, I read step 3, and what I needed to hear jumped out at me. And for those who may be watching this video for the first time, didn't see my other ones, I'm sober since 1994, and can't tell you how many times I've read the step books and all the step book and all the steps. I when I do these step reviews, I like to read the step in its entirety before I come back, because it doesn't matter how many times that I've read this. It doesn't matter how many years I'm sober. Every time I read this, it jumps out at me. If you watch my other videos on step 1 and 2, for instance, I share what popped out at me that day, and then I share kind of what it meant early on in my sobriety. Ironically, tonight, what jumped out at me is pretty much in line with what I needed to do when I first started getting sober, and that is, just what it says, turning my will and my life over to God as I understand Him now. Back then, it was explained to me that, turning it over, sometimes you got to turn things over to AA or to your sponsor or to your spiritual advisor. And I touched on this a little bit when we were talking about step 2. But that's actually what jumped out at me tonight when I read it, because it's nighttime right now when I'm recording this video, by the way. I think because I've been sober so long, I have a tendency to engage in like self-will, if that makes, like, I could be a little pig-headed and stubborn and try to control things, and sometimes the trouble it gets me in now, it's not like it was back then. The trouble that I get from being stubborn and pig-headed, or whatever you want to call it, or having control issues where sometimes I need to let go of things, is it can impact my peace of mind. And that's the one thing is, as you go through sobriety, we first want to stop drinking and doing drugs and living a crazy life and having things out of control. And at some point, our focus and goals shift to, we want to have peace of mind. And if I have control issues over something, or I try to control things that I have no control over, that impacts my peace of mind. So sometimes I need these refreshers to understand, look, you know what? I need to let go of things. I need to turn it over. And whether it's AA or God or a sponsor or whatever, that's what I needed to hear tonight. And when I first got sober, I needed to hear that too, because, I was drinking and doing drugs. My life was insane. Let me start over. I was drinking and doing drugs, step 1, right? I was insane and my life was unmanageable, step 2, right? So now when I am trying to control things and impose my will on things that I have no control over, then I'm gonna have a problem. And that's kind of what I got out of this tonight. And when I first started getting clean, I needed to understand, look, I need to turn my life over. And it's almost like we're being dependent on another thing, whether it's AA, a sponsor, God, however you want to view it. And dependence is a tough pill to swallow, especially a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts. Contrary to what people believe, we are very strong-willed people, which is why we drank and drugged for so long, right? Because we always thought that we could figure it out. And the bottom line is, step 3 tells us flat out, we tried it our way, so let's turn it over. Let's try it someone else's way. So briefly about the God thing, step two, step three, we're already talking about God. And I've said many times, you don't have to be religious. You don't have to believe in a certain religion. But clearly, the focus on a power greater than ourselves, right, is very early in the steps. So if you were ever religious and maybe you got away from your religion, or if you're spiritual and maybe you have this inner urge to seek spiritual routes to help complement your recovery, definitely do it. Because and I may have shared this, I know people who were atheist and agnostic who they ultimately said, you know what, my way didn't work, let me try their way. And that's really what step three is about. When we say turning it over, this is what we're talking about. Turn our life over, turn our decision making over, especially early in recovery. And it doesn't matter how old you are when you first start getting sober, you really need to acknowledge, like I say it all the time, normal people don't wind up in AA. People with problems wind up in AA, right? We're filled with character defects and shortcomings and resentment and bitterness and all this stuff, right? Remember, alcohol or drugs is just a symptom of the problem. The root cause is in our heads. It's in our hearts. It's a spiritual malady. And the only way to treat a spiritual malady is to reach out spiritually and to look outside of ourselves. Again, whether it's God or nature or Buddhist or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just be open to the idea that a belief in a God as you understand him, whatever you want to call it, him, her, doesn't matter. Just understand the turning over part is critical to staying sober. We have to understand that left to our own devices, we are going to make the same decisions we made prior to getting into AA. So it's only common sense to say, all right, well, we may as well seek other avenues to make better decisions, right? The whole brainwashing thing, right? AA is a, brainwashing, yes, because our brains need a good washing because the decisions we made just didn't turn out too well for us, right? So again, when in doubt, turn it over to a God as you understand him or her. It could be AA as a whole. This step book could be a God for now until you figure out where your spiritual journey is going to take you. If you were raised in some kind of religious environment, regardless of what religion it was, maybe just be open to go back to that and look into it a little bit, right? Because if I believe we were alcoholics long before we started drinking and doing drugs. That's what I believe personally. I know a lot of people believe that also. So it's possible that my alcoholism existed when I was in Catholic grammar school. So I was learning all this religious stuff, back then, and maybe I had a skewed perception of what it was, right? So I revisited my Catholic faith when I got sober. I joke around, the God I believe in now is not necessarily the God that was taught to me by the nuns, right? It was a little different when I started getting some clarity in my life, when I got clean, and it has evolved over the years. And I shouldn't say I have. I still do seek other spiritual and religious outlets. I've read, books on Judaism and Buddhism. And I mean, some people believe in Mother Earth as their God, and that's okay too. Just understand that, just like step two, a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity if we turn our will and our lives over to God or AA or a sponsor to help us make better decisions and choices until such time that we're better suited to make decisions and choices. Right? That's okay. That dependence is actually very healthy, especially early on in recovery. So that's my spiel tonight. That's what I got out of it tonight. And the beautiful thing about this is I could read step three next month, 2 months, 3 months from now, and something else different might jump out. And again, I always say, what I need to read and hear, it always jumps out when I pick up this book. always, or any other AA literature or spiritual literature for that matter. You know, I have books that I read in the morning that aren't necessarily AA and they're not Christian based, but I always get what I need when I seek spiritual outlets to pretty much nurture my soul, right? So anyway, it's awesome. It's an amazing thing. And the beautiful thing about a spiritual journey is it is a journey. It is not a destination. It is fluid. It is not static. There's peaks, there's valleys, there's turns. It's, you know, just embrace the journey. And when in doubt, reach out to someone else if you're having a problem or you're struggling a little bit, because holding it in and bottling things up is not turning our will and our lives over. So when in doubt, talk it out. I'll see you guys soon.